So Ruth chapter 2. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go over to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor." Naomi said to her, "Go ahead, my daughter." So she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you." "The Lord bless you," they answered. Boaz asked the overseer of his harvesters, "Who does that young woman belong to?" The overseer replied, "She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters.' She came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter." So Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you. And whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." At this, she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" Boaz replied, "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." "May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord," she said. "You have put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of one of your servants." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come over here, have some bread and dip it in the wine vinegar." When she sat down with the harvesters, he offered her some roasted grain. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. As she got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to his men, "Let her gather among the sheaves, and don't reprimand her. Even pull out some stalks for her from the bundles, and leave them for her to pick up, and don't rebuke her." So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. Then she threshed the barley she had gathered, and it amounted to about an ephah. She carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over after she had eaten enough. Her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz," she said. "The Lord bless him," Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead." She added, "That man is our close relative. He is one of our guardian redeemers." Then Ruth the Moabite said, "He even said to me, 'Stay with my workers until they finish harvesting all my grain.'" Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It will be good for you, my daughter, to go with the women who work for him, because in someone else's field you might be harmed." So Ruth stayed close to the women of Boaz to glean until the barley and wheat harvests were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law. May the Lord bless the reading of his word. Guide my mouth, I speak the message that I prepare, that be his message, not my message. That his will might be done, not mine. That he might receive glory and honor, not I. And all those with ears might hear the words of the Lord. Amen. Amen. My sermon this morning is entitled Ruth, based on the novel Dachaf by Lapis. You see, Ruth is a story that we should know better than we usually do. If we were raised in Judaism, Ruth is one of the Megillah, the stories that is read from beginning to end, and it's read because it deals with the barley harvest, so it's read for the harvest festival. But we tend not to know that much about Ruth. We tend not to read it. It's a short little book. It's placed at the end of Judges, so it's Judges and then Ruth, because it's thought that the time frame in which it takes place is during the Judges period. So that's why it fits in there. It's an interesting story, but the place that we tend to see Ruth most, and it stands out for us, is actually at Christmas time, when we read the genealogy of Jesus found in Matthew, that most Jewish of Jesus' genealogies, the one that emphasizes the Davidic nature of Jesus. We'll read it on Christmas Eve. We read that there are 3 women who are mentioned, and one of them is Ruth, which is a significant thing given the fact that this, like I said, this most Jewish of the genealogies includes a Moabite. If you're reading King James, a Moabitess, a woman of Moab, a foreigner, who's included in the genealogy of King David and included in the genealogy of Jesus. So we read this story and we are transported back to about 1,000 years or 1,100 years before Jesus. And we read this story and we are brought to an amazingly emotional, it's like a little novel, really. It's a short book, but it's beautifully crafted. In fact, it's one of the first texts that often students will learn when they learn Hebrews. That this is one of the first texts that they are given to translate. Also, in full disclosure, I should tell you that the person who translated it for the NIV is none other than Mark Wilson, my mentor from Gordon College, who came here. You remember the guy with the beard who spoke when I was installed. Ravana Wilson is the guy who translated this for the NIV. So it's a book that, again, I'm very familiar with, but I know that many people aren't. So we read this story, and we read about Ruth and Naomi, who changes her name to Mara, it means bitter. And we have this amazing thing, because like I said, it's a little over 1,000 years before Jesus, and yet it's the story of women. It's the story of a daughter-in-law and her mother-in-law, and her sister-in-law, and how they get along in a man's world. Her situation is that she is a widowed daughter-in-law. So her husband has died. She has no children. She's on her own, and the only other person she has in the world is her mother-in-law, who's also a widow with no children. And that's a pretty tough place to be in the ancient world. At the whim of whoever comes along, there's no protection for you. There's no provision for you. Remember, this is a time before Social Security or good neighbors or food shelves or any of that sort of stuff. These women have nothing. Not only that, but Ruth and Naomi were in Moab, and Naomi has come back to Israel. And so Ruth has left her homeland. She's left the place that she understands, the language and the culture and the geography. She's left that place and gone to Israel. She's a foreigner. I was reading about mushrooms, because we had some mushrooms on a tree, and I was looking at them, and I was reading about mushrooms. You know, most people get sick when they eat mushrooms, when they come from someplace else and use the rules about gathering mushrooms in, let's say, China, and they move to California, and they use the same rules when they're in China as in California. Different mushrooms there, you've got to be careful. Or if they go from one part of Europe to another part, oh, you can eat the ones with spots, oh, you can't eat the ones with spots. When you leave the place, you leave the place that you grew up, the place that you understand, you leave behind some security and some safety. It's interesting how many times Ruth is referred to as a Moabite, to emphasize that to the reader. Remember, she's a Moabite. It's always interesting to me how many names of famous, what we consider, oh, these are good Jewish names. names, right? A little girl named Ruth. Oh, that's a great Jewish name. A little boy named Moses. Oh, that's a great Jewish name. No, Moses is Egyptian. Ruth is Moabite. Esther, that's a good Jewish name. No, it's not. It's Persian. It's Ishtar. Mordecai. Oh, that's a, how Jewish is that name? No, Mordecai is Marduk. That's Persian too. Throughout the Bible, there's this struggle between the people of God and all their cultures that they find themselves in. Well, that's a helpful thing for us in the church as we struggle to figure out how we're going to do the stuff that we're going to do with our culture. Anyway, so Ruth is in this situation, and she even, the language that gets used when she talks about herself in verse 13, she says, "You will put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant, though I have not the standing of one of your servants." She actually said, the phrase she uses is servant girl. It's a technical term for the lowest standing of women. It's in India it would be the Dalits, the untouchables. We might say it's someone who's homeless. It's a different term than gets used that gets translated the same way in verses 8 and 9 when it's talking about the women who are gathering. When that term is used, it's a woman, she's a servant, she's what we might call a slave, but she's someone who has enough standing that she might marry a freedman, or she might at least become his concubine. She can move up a little bit in the world. She's got a little bit of possibilities. Again, you have to remember, this is worse than like a Jane Austen novel or something. There's all sorts of standings and who can marry whom and, all sorts of stuff. When Ruth describes herself, she uses the lowest term. She's essentially, I don't know if you'd say she's a homeless person or, a street person or she's just ignored. But she has some responsibilities. She's got her mother-in-law that, even though Ruth has nothing, she's taking care of her mother-in-law. And you don't know why Naomi doesn't go out and help her glean, but from my reading, I would take that to mean that Naomi is so frail, so weak, so helpless, that she can't even get up out of bed and go pick up some grain in the fields. So Ruth is this completely bottom rung of society. But she's got some responsibilities. And the story of Ruth is her sort of struggle and challenge to do the best she can with absolutely nothing. That's why I entitled this the way that I did. It's roughly analogous to Precious, right? The book, or based on the book Push by Sapphire. Or if you don't remember that movie, and if you haven't seen it, it's a tough movie to watch. But some of you may remember A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, right? A novel from an earlier age, again, about that sort of difficulty. Or here's a little short version of poem that I like. It's up on my bulletin board. I look at it. It's called Choice by Curry Olson. Beauty's a woman with a triple nose piercing in a battered Chevy pickup outside Family Dollar. She waits while her 18-year-old boyfriend runs in to buy her a pack of Salem Lights. He comes back out 13 cents short. She digs in her purse and finds a quarter with green gum stuck on it. Then feeds organic mango sauce to the baby that she couldn't bear to abort. Ruth is a picture of a woman at the very bottom of society's ladder, struggling to be faithful to what she knows is right, but also to survive. She is an inspiration for those of us who have something, because she has absolutely nothing going for her. She has no standing, she has no family, she has no prospects, she has no wealth, she has nothing. But she's trying to survive. Most every one of us, no matter how bad off we think we may be, we're better off than Ruth. who has nothing except obligations to take care of Naomi. Ruth sacrifices for Naomi. She gives up herself for Naomi. And it's by sticking with her. And of course it's a benefit for Naomi. Because had Ruth not stayed with her, she would have died in the wilderness someplace. She would have starved and just a skeletal remains found at some point. Probably not even. The wolves would have pulled her apart and scattered her remains. So it's an obvious benefit to Naomi that Ruth stays with her, although Ruth has almost nothing to give her. It's a benefit for Orpah, the other daughter-in-law that Naomi has, who is also widowed and in exactly the same situation as Ruth, only Orpah decides to give it all up and be on her own and try and accomplish something. So the story has her going off and presumably marrying and having a family and taking care of her own needs. She's also in survival mode, but because of Ruth's sacrifice, because Ruth steps up to the plate and says, yeah, I'll take care of our mother-in-law who has no one else to take care of her, it frees Orpah to do all the things that she's going to do. You don't have mail or Facebook to catch up on old friends with in the ancient world, so as far as we know, there's never a thank you from Orpah. There's never an acknowledgement of the sacrifice that Ruth made that enabled Orpah to have her life, to be successful. Orpah just goes off and does it, and Ruth's there. Ruth's sacrifice for Naomi benefits Boaz and the other family members because, again, this is a woman who has nothing. Naomi, she has no possibility of anything happening for her except badness. And Ruth takes care of her, stands in for the men in the family, the kinsman redeemer. In Hebrew, it's the Miyudah Mishpacha. The one who knows her, the kinsman who is close from the clan. Ruth is a stand-in for the men of the family and essentially doing their job. They're the ones who have the responsibility. This redeemer person is supposed to buy back family property when it gets sold, is supposed to take care of the people in the extended family when they fall on hard times. Ruth does that. And so her sacrifice benefits the entire family. But Ruth's sacrifice also benefits the entire society. Remember, there's no social services, there's no things. So what would have happened to Naomi had Ruth not stepped up and said, yes, I'll take care of you? You'd have this elderly woman wandering the streets, not able to get food in her mouth. And then in chapter 2 is where we get this interesting thing, because not only is it a story of Ruth's kindness and Ruth's commitment, but in chapter 2 we get this introduction to the second character, right? So we have, or third character, we have Naomi and Ruth, and we get their situation, but now enters Boaz. See, it's a lovely story to read at Christmas time because there's all sorts of Christ-like salvific figures in this text. And one of them is Boaz, who's also listed in the genealogy of Jesus. And Boaz comes in and shows kindness. It's in the Hebrew, it's chesed, it's covenantal love, it's what some of you refer to as loving kindness. It's this commitment that plays out in somebody else's life. It's I will be with you through thick and thin. See, Boaz is an example for those of us who would live Christ-like lives, who want to be Jesus followers, who want to show the kind of love that God has shown to us. We want to show that to other people who have less. And so there are 5 things that Boaz does towards Ruth. In verse 8, we see the first principle that we can take into our own hearts as we want to help other people. The first one is that he says, don't go anywhere else. When we want to help somebody, we do not send them away. We make a commitment to them. We say, yes, I want you. Right when Bernie Sanders was the governor, or was the mayor of Burlington, right? One of his homeless deals was he used to give people who were homeless a bus ticket to Florida. Now, I sort of understand that because it's a heck of a lot easier to live on the street in Florida than it is in Burlington. But on the other hand, it's also passing the buck. I once had another church drop somebody off in our parking lot and said, "Here, Pastor Abel, deal with you." Now, I will, full disclosure, that person was transient, was moving along, so I drove to Latham, New York, because that's where they were headed that way. So I passed the buck too a little bit. But there's a sense in which when we want to help somebody, we can't just, don't let the door hit you on the way out. We've got to say, no, God has placed you in my life for a reason at this time, and I'm going to help you as best I can to the fullest amount of my ability. I'm making this commitment to you. You and me, we're in this together. Boaz does that to Ruth. He says, no, don't go anywhere else. I'm committing to you. In verse 9, he makes a statement to her that he says, follow after the women. I have, so he's including her, and he says, I have told the men not to lay a hand on you. He includes her and he protects her. He says, I'm going to take care of you. And he doesn't. He says, you don't have anything to worry about. Apparently Boaz is some standing. He's a man of means. He's got harvesters who he comes and checks in on. Right? If we were Marxists, we'd say he's management. And he says, I'm going to include you among the women. You have a place, and I've made provisions that you are going to be protected. We can do that with other people. We can include them and we can protect them. We can make sure that we're not having this relationship with them just to take advantage of them. We're not, sometimes people, they say, oh, well, I can help get you out of debt for a low fee. Some people prey on other people's weaknesses and situations and such. Boaz doesn't do that. He says, no, I'm going to include you and I'm going to protect you. Verse 11, he says something amazing. He says, I've been told about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. How you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with your people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you richly for what you've done. He recognizes Ruth's virtue, and he tells her that. See, many times when we're helping somebody, we're focused on their problems. And we don't recognize the fact that, yeah, they may have some problems, but they've also displayed some amazing courage and virtue in their lives to get to that point. Right, that woman in the poem about choice. Yeah, she's got all sorts of issues. Not real thrilled she finds cigarettes and, doing this and the boyfriend and certainly the baby and less than ideal situation. But by golly, she's also displayed some courage and some integrity. She's displayed something that we can take to heart. That's why it's up on my bulletin board to remind me. And so he says to Ruth, you've done some amazing things for your mother-in-law. When we're out helping people, when we're recognizing that somebody's got an issue that God has placed on our heart to assist them with, whether it's food or finances or spiritual or family or emotional or whatever, we should also be looking to see how, isn't it amazing that they're still there when we would have been curled up in a fetal position crying our eyes out. But they put one foot in front of the other and kept on going. That they managed to have some success over here in their lives, even though they've got all these challenges here. We can sing their virtue. We can praise them and say, wow, this is great. He then extends hospitality. In verse 14, he says, come over here, right? So the picture is, here's the boss man, and everybody's trying to, get to him and get in good favor with him. They're sitting down eating lunch, and Ruth's over there with the servant girls, and he invites her over. He says, here, come sit at my table. I know they have tables, but he says, come be in my servant. You ever been in a situation you just sort of look and see who's hanging out by the edges and go over and try and be intentionally hospitable to them? One of the things about hospitality is it means that you take a lower position, right? I don't know about your family, but in my family, both growing up and in my own house, there's Dad's chair, right? I have my chair, and the kids are always sitting in it. And when I walk into the room, right, first thing I have to say, get out of my chair, and I sit in it. But if I'm being hospitable to you, and I invite you over to my house, there's no mention of Dad's chair. It's here, wouldn't you like this one? Take this, the best, or the most comfortable, or whatever. He invites her over, and then he goes to the fire and roasts some grain. He roasts some barley in the fire and brings it to her. Not marshmallows on a stick, but essentially that's what he does. He becomes a servant for her, the servant girl, the less than servant girl. When we're reaching out to somebody else, we extend a radical hospitality to them. And then there's something fantastic. In verses 15, 16, he instructs his men, let her glean among the sheaves. In the ancient world, the Levitical code that God gives the Israelites, you were supposed to leave the edges of your field for the poor, the widow, the orphan, the stranger. That they could come in and pick up what was left. And it wasn't against the law. And in fact, the rabbis even said when you're picking, if you drop something on the ground, you're not supposed to pick it back up. Because when it drops on the ground, it becomes property of the poor. It's no longer yours. You ever pick blueberries? Or fiddleheads? Or apples? Right? You pick them on and it drops on the ground. Now, sometimes I will pick them up. Sometimes I'll leave them thinking about that, how blessed I am. Depends on what exactly I'm picking. One day we were picking apples with the kids, and I said, they dropped an apple, and I said, don't worry about that one. You can leave that one. The bears will get it. Then one of my kids started pulling them off and chucking them on the ground, going, "Here, bears! Here, bears!" But so that was the normal practice that, when it gets the pickings that are left are for the poor, the widow, the orphan. And then, but Boaz goes a step further, and he says to them, let her pick among the sheaves, right? When everything's piled up in storage mode, and there's a little bit, not only let her wander around there, not just out in the field, pull some of the really good stuff out and toss it on the ground. Let her think that she's, found the mother lode. Ooh, this is a really good spot. He's providing charity for her, but he does it in a way that respects her dignity. That allows her to sort of work for it. It's not really. I mean, she when she goes back home to Naomi and she goes, wow, you did a fantastic job. Everybody involved recognizes what's going on, but there's just a level of dignity that's given to Ruth. Make charity seem like it's not charity. Maybe you give a job to somebody who doesn't really deserve the job, but they need the money. They need the position. Maybe you say, yeah, you could probably do a better job yourself. But it's okay. Give them a job. I remember Barbara Kingsbury once told me about being in Korea, and she gets to Korea, and the mission organization had set her up with a cook and a housekeeper. And she goes, I don't need a cook and a housekeeper. And they said, no, this is the way, because if you say no, then those people are out of work. Their kids will starve. But this is something that they can do. So she, begrudgingly had this, okay, this is my way of doing charity. You know, you can come up with some job to give somebody. Maybe when you're at a restaurant, over-tip. Just some little, you know, it can be extravagant, you know, what I see on Facebook, the $50 tip on a $25 bill. It can be, you know, that's probably pushing charity not seeming like charity, you know, but just make it a couple of bucks more. Throw an extra $5 in there because you know you heard the person's story and you know that you know money's tight for them. Maybe they're doing a lousy job and you're going, boy, they are not cut out to be a waitress or a waiter. I'm going to give them a little extra money because, by golly, nobody else is. Maybe utilize a service that mostly poor people use. Shop at the thrift store. My mom used to say when money was very tight for us, she liked thrift stores because it allowed her some dignity but still get a bargain. You know, and if all the cars at the thrift store are all broken down, you know, 20-year-old, held together with duct tape, all the people who are going there know, oh, you know, I've got to shop at the thrift store. But if they pull in next to the shiny new BMW and see doctors, or, so-and-so's shopping there, or, you know, somebody in an Armani suit, I know nobody gets Armani, but, you know, you can just get, no, this is a bargain's a bargain, right? Maybe leave the best ones for somebody else, like the cleanings on the field. I don't really need to say this, that somebody else, just imagine somebody whose Christmas is going to be made because they found that thing. But be there with them. You know, when you're serving soup or sandwiches to the homeless, have a bowl of soup, eat a sandwich, sit down next to the folks. Add some dignity to it. Make it seem like, yeah, no, this is a good deal. Come, get a free lunch. Good enough. Love them with the name of Jesus. Love them as a child of God. You see, when we do these things, when we act like Boaz, when we allow his story to inspire us, we become, we imitate the way that God reaches out to us through Jesus. You see, God reaches out to us in the same way. He comes alongside us. He's born as one of us. He struggles. He takes advantage of when Jesus is born, right? The scriptures say that his parents offer the pigeons as sacrifice. That's the poor person's option. In the ancient world, the rich person's option when the son is born is to slaughter I forget if it's a calf or a lamb, but it's some sort of meat instead of poultry. But when you're poor, you offer up a couple of pigeons because everybody can find pigeons. Jesus is born into a poor family. God, when he reaches out to us, becomes as low on the socioeconomic scale as he possibly can. He comes alongside us, he extends grace to us, and he says, yeah, here's something you can do for me. You can preach this sermon, you can deliver this card, you can show love to somebody in this way, that way. And we start feeling all good. Oh, aren't I so special? I know the Bible oh so well. I'm a pretty virtuous person. No, we're not. The only reason we can do anything, the only reason we can accomplish anything is because the Holy Spirit, God has sent to work something out in our lives that accomplishes something good. God's pulling out the sheaves out of the storehouses in heaven and throwing them down just in front of us and saying, here, get this one. We come along, oh, hey, look at how good a cleaner I am, picking up this good work. See, Boaz is a type of Christ. Boaz is a salvific figure that we can emulate our lives about. Ruth is in the genealogy of Jesus too. She too has that sacrificial servant heart. And so when we read about them, we may look and go, well, this doesn't sound very Christmassy. Of course, we look outside and it feels like barley harvest time might be just around the corner. On one hand, it doesn't seem very Christmassy, but it's exactly the attitude. It's exactly the behavior that we should have at Christmas time.